We are live on Facebook and we are here in Zoom as well. And I want to welcome everybody to a very special panel that we're having tonight. Their topic is organizing live events in a vaccinated world. My name is Reid Mihalko from readaboutsex.com. I use he, him pronouns. I am the creator of Sex Geek Summer Camp, which is a business, used to be and will be again, an in-person business retreat. And it is my pleasure to have invited some really amazing event producers who all have live events happening somewhere in the world this year. And because these are friends and colleagues of mine, I've been in touch with them about what their protocols are in a post-vaccinated, or in some parts of the world, slowly becoming vaccinated world. And I thought it was really interesting how they were getting their information and figuring out how they were going to create and run their events. And it feels like it's a poignant topic for a lot of event creators and teachers and workshop facilitators. So this is why we're having our discussion panel. I'm going to get out of the way real quick, and I'm going to let our panelists for tonight introduce themselves. I just got a text from Marla. She'll be here in about 5 minutes, so everything's good. I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves, and then we'll move into like just a conversation, a very casual conversation about how we're making our decisions and figuring out how we're running our events this year. So again, if you're just joining us, if you could turn off your camera, that will allow us to do a more savvy looking Zoom situation. And for if you see people showing up and you want to remind them in the chat to turn off their cameras while we're talking, that's great too. Everyone help each other out, and welcome to tonight. I'm gonna pick who goes first, and then the next person gets to pick who goes next on our panelists. And I pick Angel Adeyoha to go next.
I love that I'm shaking my head and Reid picks me. Cool. I feel a little scattered because I just spent the afternoon running around picking up donations for our new community center. So I just got home. Hi everyone, I'm Angel. I am the executive director of Folsom Street, a notorious event production situation, as well as a nonprofit with about 38 years in San Francisco. And I think today is a good illustration that we are, well, a very large event, a very small operation. So I'm really excited because this whole last year in quarantine, I'm really excited to have this conversation because this whole last year in quarantine has been a lot of learning from all of my very talented peers, many of whom are on this panel. So thanks for organizing this, Reid.
You're welcome.
Oh, I choose someone. I choose Romi.
All right, thank you. My name is Romi Elan. I have been producing SoulPlay festivals for the last 6 years. SoulPlay festivals was also a predominantly live events business that we mostly produce festivals that are immersive events over the course of 4 days at a time, with a focus on human connection at the core, but really kind of experiencing the range of human experience. Some of the things that make our events unique is like the fact that our events are 100% sober and really invite people into kind of it's a big learning experience for people more than anything else. And I am excited that we are going to throw our next event this year in 2021 in September. And so live and with full force. So that is exciting. And I will choose Misha.
Hey everyone, my name is Misha. I co-produce Bonobo Network with William Winters, who is here. We are a private membership group, and we bring together folks who understand that monogamy isn't right for everyone, and that pleasure comes in many different packages to and so we are we have about 1,000 members at this point, all over the world, because we expanded once COVID hit and started bringing in people all over the country, but we are Bay Area based, and we just started throwing our first live events a week and a half ago. So we have a little bit of experience bringing people together live after being shut down for so long, and I'm excited to be here. William?
Hey everybody, my name is William Winters, and I'm the co-producer of Bonobo Network, along with the illustrious Misha Bonaventura. And you know, this last period has been full of opportunity and learning. We, as Misha indicated, just did so much online programming and also built so many relationships with health professionals and public health professionals, and really got a lot of support in making calls about how to come back, how to prepare our community for the return, et cetera. And I'm just so excited to share some of those learnings with all of you.
Yay. Thank you, William. I'll go next. Marla should be here shortly. My name is Reid Mihalko. Readaboutsex.com is my main website, and my largest live event that I run is Sex Geek Summer Camp, which started back in 2014. We took a year off when I was doing my accountability process, and I'll drop into the link a link to the blog for my public accountability process. I stepped down from teaching for a year, and then after that process was complete, we had camp again, and then the pandemic hit. I had the choice of maybe running camp this year, and I chose not to. And that was a choice. And now, like with everybody else throwing their live events, I'm like, oh, should I really have done it? But I still think that was a good choice for me. And I'm really excited to talk about tonight, like how we're moving forward and trying to do harm reduction in our communities and for our events. And I see that Marla's with us. And Marla, would you like to say hello and let people know who you are a little bit before we dive into our discussion for tonight?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry that I am late. I am Marla. I am a sexologist, sexual strategist, just, pleasure activist, all the things. And I am the owner of a sexuality education company called Velvet Lips. And then I'm also one of the co-founders for the Sex Down South conference that happens in Atlanta every year. And so I'm sure we're going to talk about all of those things. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm having Dick Fest this weekend, but it's another online event. And yeah, that's it so far. I feel like I'm a little late, so I'm a little discombobulated. So anything you want me to answer in particular?
No, you did fine.
Okay.
But now everybody wants to know what Dick Fest is. So you should probably tell us. What's Dick Fest?
Dick Fest just came out of a dream. I woke up one morning, I was like, oh my gosh, all these wonderful educators do, Dick workshops. Let's just do it all together in one weekend. And I gathered them all together. And so this weekend that's happening. So it starts tomorrow night and goes until Sunday night. And it's for everybody, doesn't matter your gender identity, as long it's a phallic centered virtual festival. So we have folks from all over the world that are attending, and you get a snail mailed what I call cock box that will be mailed to you later on. So it's going to be fun, very educational, like I said, for all genders. So absolutely. Yeah. Good stuff.
Well, there you have it. We start with DickFest. So welcome everyone. Marla, you were great, and I'm so happy that you're here. So again, just for people who are arriving now, and also for people who are watching on Facebook Live, we're on Facebook on my personal page, and I dropped that into the chat link. So if anyone needs closed or would like closed captions, interesting factoid for those of you running virtual events, you can't do closed captions with like otter.ai or rev.com and then also be live streaming onto Facebook. So we won't have closed captions here, but with the live stream onto Facebook, Facebook's automatically auto-generating closed captions. So you can go to the Facebook video to get the closed captions. Just click on the little gear symbol towards the bottom of the video, and that should just all be happening automatically. So that's like a kind of workaround for that situation. For everybody else who's joining us, if you could turn off your cameras for now, what we're going to do is that will allow me with the Facebook, with the Zoom, I can do gallery view, which will show all the panelists, because Zoom and Facebook, when you're living, automatically kind of does speaker view if I'm trying to show us as a spotlight situation. So that's kind of a workaround, and that should make the video viewing experience look better for the people on Facebook Live. If you're enjoying this call and you have friends who are also event producers, they don't have to be sex positive, but I mean, hopefully they're nice people, then send them to the Facebook video so that they can tune in and watch, because we've got a plethora of information tonight that might be really helpful around harm reduction. Other things, ask us questions in the chat. When we take more questions from people, you're welcome. If you want to raise your electronic hand, I can call on you. You can turn your camera on. You can be a part of this. But right now, we're just kind of asking people to keep their cameras off. And that's that. We're going to talk for about 90 minutes, more or less. And then, hopefully we'll give you a bunch of resources and ideas. And again, I just want to thank everybody. The response to this was pretty massive. And this is also being recorded, and there'll be a replay sent out in a day or two. And you are more than happy to share that replay with people to help with their events. That being said, my first question, or where I'd like to start this topic, is just with, and we can kind of riff and it's not like everybody gets like 15 minutes to speak. I want it to be interactive. Answering the question, like, what had you decide, like, now was the time, like you could do a live event? What were the things that you ran into, and the thinking that had you be like, okay, I'm gonna green light this and make the decision? I think that's a great place to start. And whoever would like to go first, it's a race to unmute yourselves, and you can just lead the conversation.
I'm happy to start.
Great.
Cool. Okay, so we started preparing for the reopening more or less the moment I saw the news alert go by that Pfizer was submitting its vaccine for approval back in like October or November of 2020. We messaged our community. We, sort of started setting the expectation. We started getting people like ready to understand that like vaccines were going to be the sort of magic ticket, not just for participation in Bonobo, but also, for reclaiming any sense of normalcy that we lost. The thing that like specifically got us to the point of deciding that it would be okay to have events was so over the course of the pandemic, we had a couple of interview sessions, Ask Me Anythings, with a public health physician here in California who used to run the Department of Public Health's, the California Department of Public Health's STI division. And, this person was dealing pretty intensely with COVID in their most recent work capacity, and was just incredibly knowledgeable. And so around the time that the state of California announced that a lot of the restrictions were being lifted, we started talking about like what it would take to throw parties reasonably safely. And what it eventually came down to is that the surest way to minimize, not completely eliminate, but minimize risk is making sure that anyone at any gathering, whatever it is, sex party or party of any kind, is fully vaccinated. That was the key. And when vaccinations in California became widely available, we knew that like we couldn't start doing events when before people were widely vaccinated. But once basically anyone who wanted a vaccine could get a vaccine, we decided to pull the trigger. And it just so happens that our first event was a couple of weeks shy of California's officially lifting all of the state COVID restrictions. And so, I think we're technically not in compliance with, the sort of whatever tier Alameda County is in. But, we're doing our events at outdoor venues. We're very fortunate to have an outdoor venue that can accommodate us. Yeah, I mean, it was just like that confluence of factors: outdoor venue, widespread vaccinations, and the conversations with public health officials.
Thanks, William.
Sure.
Who else would like to share?
I'll go. So what made us start, I think, for Sex Down South, we have always wanted it to be in-person conference. So even with the pandemic and everything, it was a real struggle for us to take it online. But I think considering, how we needed to make everything accessible, or how we wanted to make things as accessible as possible, we decided to do a hybrid conference this year. So for folks who are in person, they can be in person, and particularly in Atlanta and in the South. I don't know how many of y'all are in like Georgia or Florida, but most people have been like, what pandemic? There are some of us that have been like, pandemic, there's a pandemic happening. And then there's a lot of people, especially my folks of color, and especially in queer communities who have still been active and still been hanging out. And so it's been, that has also sort of been one of the challenges, but also I would also say one of our strengths as well, because we know that people will still want to come out and make it. But considering that Tia, who is the other co-founder of Sex Down South, is a COVID compliance officer, we want to make sure that we are doing the best we can to ensure that people are being safe and healthy. So, or doing the best that they can. So that's why the hybrid came about, making it accessible, but also making sure that people can come in. And so the ways that we are navigating that is with the, sort of vaccine status, we're thinking about doing sort of a bracelet method to say like, hey, if you've been vaccinated or if you haven't been vaccinated, and just showing, visibly showing for folks, and if we get a blind participant, we'll navigate that, but visibly showing folks, hey, this is what my status is, and you can feel free to interact with them or not, or stay 6 feet, or do whatever you need to do to be safe. So yeah, that's what our plan is so far. But we started just originally just because we love to hug and kiss and touch people. So we feel like it's always going to be necessary.
Thanks, Marla. Who else?
Uh, well, we are very lucky that our events are mainly outdoors. So we've pretty much been, as William said, the second that we could start monitoring, we started monitoring. We've been in kind of constant contact with the Department of Public Health in San Francisco for Folsom. But one of the things that the pandemic weirdly brought to us was the opportunity to open a community center in Soma. So we're also having to contend with the rules around indoor gatherings because of our desire to be able to host folks, especially for like educational stuff. And a lot of the smaller clubs and orgs in San Francisco have we're already having a hard time finding meeting space before COVID. And I think that after COVID, everybody is certainly on a more budget than before. And so it's been really hard for folks to find space. So that's one of our goals, is to provide that space. And we've made a pledge to our stakeholders that we will either meet or exceed, and generally want to exceed, the state and city guidelines. So for example, our events in July and September, July's event, we are still required to be masked because of our density. But by September, they may have changed that, but we're still planning on recommending masks, requiring it from our vendors, requiring it from our staff, and recommending for the other guests. A lot of our marketing that we're working on says pants required, mask required, pants optional. Scratch that, reverse it. You know what I mean? So like, cover your face, but bring whatever else. It was really, it was a lot of conversations with our board getting to, yes, we are doing public events this year. And I think the thing that kind of like tipped us over was the knowledge that reopening was coming. And if we didn't put down our money and grab our permits, someone else would get that weekend. And if that happened, the potential of actually shifting that for us, maybe in an ongoing fashion, existed, for one. And for two, we knew that people were going to do all kinds of events, and that the way that we could actually be engaged from a public health standpoint, both by setting a good example and also like directly involving public health people, was to have an event. So it's interesting that I feel like a lot of the folks on the board at first were kind of like, well, it might be too soon and we don't know if we want to. And my stance was, if somebody else runs it, we don't know what their safety protocols are. If we run it, we can up the game. And so we're going to have vaccines on site. We're going to have testing on site. We're going to have a brand new casual sex and queer community public health initiative from the Department of Public Health doing a bunch of outreach. We're doing specific outreach that we haven't done in years past with our houseless neighbors. Like, we're using this opportunity to really foreground public health in a way that really hasn't been done at Folsom since the 80s, since we were founded as a response to the AIDS crisis. So we're kind of like, our September event is being renamed Megahood 2021 because our first Folsom Street Fair in 1984 was called Megahood. So we're kind of getting back to roots on that, in recognizing that people working sort of on the edges of queer topics and the edges of sexual liberation have a unique ability to push conversation and culture that is kind of hard for the public health folks to get at. So we're a great vehicle for that. So I think we saw it as, in some ways, a responsibility. I mean, in other ways, it is the greatest party. So there's a bit of both.
Yay. Thank you for that, Angel. And I love the idea that like getting out in front and being able to role model and up the standards, like set the precedent for folks. I hadn't thought of it like that, and that feels really powerful. And it is the best party, the greatest party. Romi, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, so I think for me also, like Angel, our events are outside for the most part, and a lot less dense than Folsom. So the decision to go ahead, and it's in September. So when we were making the decision to go ahead, basically I was looking at the case studies, especially Israel, as a place that was kind of ahead of us in terms of their vaccination campaign, and was watching closely what was happening socially as the vaccine rolled out, and as kind of different percentages were like different marks were hit, and how basically I was paying close attention to how people's behaviors were changing and how people's attitudes towards the pandemic were changing, and how fear, was being replaced by excitement again, and wanting to go out, and things were happening. And first it was underground things, and now they're like, there's no restrictions at all. And they're like, there's no mask mandates, there's no nothing. And that's with like 65% vaccination. So I was kind of looking at that. They were 2 months ahead, and I was saying, I'm pretty sure I took a bet that in California will be the same. And it so far seems to be like that, and that we will get to those same numbers, and that the behavior will just be the same, and the adoption of like kind of back to normal will be similar. So go California.
Yeah, and also I just do want to do a shout out, because I know we have people from all over the world right now on the call, and also I'm imagining watching the recordings. And like I'm doing a class right now called Ready for Reentry, which is helping people start to get ready to come back into dating and hooking up. And we have people in the class that are just in countries where that's not happening. And so there's also kind of like, my heart goes out to everybody where if you're having FOMO that we're getting to run events now, and you're in a place where it's not time yet, like that sucks. I hope things get better more quickly. And this is going to segue into my next question, but I hope what we're talking about helps you be more prepared sooner going into it. And so my next question for you all as organizers, like, what are the struggles as you start to figure out how you're going to do your events? What are the struggles that you're having as an event producer? It's hard enough to organize and run an event, and now we've been in isolation and all the stress and things that are going on. Like, I'm feeling rusty about running an event. So I'm also kind of like, what are you learning and finding out about your own abilities right now, and how are you, if you are, taking care of yourself as you go into a stressful event right after a stressful 15 months? Who wants to leap at that one?
I mean, I think one of the things that I started thinking about early was emotional support. We offer peer-to-peer support at our events. And one of the things that I know when Burning Man was looking at potentially doing Burning Man, they were really thinking about their rangers and their peer-to-peer support teams, because they were really thinking that people would have harder times as we got together. And so that has been one of the things that I've been really paying attention to and wanting to acknowledge for people. Our first party did not feel more emotionally sensitive than any of the other parties that we threw. So I'm not necessarily seeing that there's extra emotional support needed right now. But I'm glad that we have it. And I'm glad that we are also offering weekday emotional support online meetings. So people can come online every day at noon and get peer-to-peer support through our community. And so anyway, that's just been one thing that has been on my mind.
Yeah, I'd like to say that one of the things that I am concerned about is, I think that everyone has been through like this kind of has been through an experience throughout the past year of some sort, and the diversity in experience is pretty big. And there's some people that haven't left their houses, or didn't leave their house, and were like lived in a genuine fear for their life or for the lives of their loved ones. And there's other people at the other side of the extreme that felt that maybe it wasn't such a big deal and didn't understand why the whole world is freaking out. And so the thing that I'm concerned about is conversations happening over the course of the event, where where these like very different worldviews clash. And I've seen them clash on Facebook, and it's never pretty when that happens. And I guess my question, and the thing that I'm trying to figure out, is how to set the stage, because these conversations will happen and these worldviews will come up. And I'm trying to figure out how to create an environment that allows for these conversations to come up and to be had in a productive way, in a way that ends up feeling nourishing, and like people can learn from each other and actually listen, and be compassionate towards each other, and not become a like self-righteous battle. That's the thing that I'm pondering.
And are you worried, Romi, that's going to happen at the event or going into the event, like
at the event
before? Okay, got it.
As people, for some people, it's going to be one of the first times that they gather, and for a lot of people, it might be one of the first time that they gather in that number. Where there's like a lot of people together, and there will be a vast diversity of opinions or experiences about COVID, and it will be I can't prevent the topic from being spoken about.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we did was offer meetups prior to the actual event, so that people could have some space to, at their level, at their comfort level, interact with Bonobo members prior to entering a space where there was no mask and people were going to be potentially making out and sharing air, not only sharing air, but like actually coming together. And so that was really helpful for sure. The other thing I wanted to say is our peer-to-peer support is for Bonobo members. So join Bonobo, and you can come to our peer-to-peer support meetings.
And Misha, what's the link for that again?
apply.bonobonetwork.com.
Thanks.
Thanks for asking.
Marla, how are you all pre-planning, for support? And also the question is like support for you all as organizers too, not just for your people, but like I want to see you all get through it, and not crumple and cower in the corner after your event, as it feels like sometimes after you do something big.
Yeah, I've talked about this on my radio show. I personally struggle a bit, just because we don't know the reproductive health outcomes of the vaccination, and I'm trying to have another baby, and I've had friends who have had major reproductive issues, including hemorrhaging and things that happen after they have received the vaccination. And so for me, I'm struggling personally with the decision of to get the vaccine, as well as my wife, because the hope is that I'll be carrying her eggs. So that is my personal struggle. And so with that personal struggle, I'm carrying it into the work. Right. So I'm thinking about how I am going to navigate that with an in-person conference, and, being around people. I'm used to working from home and used to being by myself and in front of the computer. So the pandemic wasn't wasn't that much of a change for me. But to think about in-person events and navigating that is going to be, that's something I think about just constantly. As far as the the struggles we have, I think the struggles around like, what does it mean to get vaccinated? What does it mean to not get vaccinated? What do the justifications have to be? How are people going to react about, you know, certain things around being vaccinated or not being vaccinated? And so, I think the tension there is just like, how do we make this as accessible as possible, but then understand people's needs? And like I said, here in the South, I don't know how many folks are here in the South, but there are just a lot of people who just haven't adhered to a lot of the, you know, what the rest of the country has done to be safe. So, you know, it feels that I think that's what I struggle with, or in what we struggle with, I think too. Yeah. Did I answer your question? I feel like I just I was thinking about my own shit, you know?
No, but that was part of the question, is like, because most of the people that are on this call are in some ways creating events or opportunities and working with people. And I think one of the things I've been guilty of in creating camp and other events that I've run is like, I'm just gonna carry all the burden and all the weight. And also, child of an alcoholic, hello. But I'm gonna do all the work, and that's not sustainable. It's just not healthy. And so, like, I mean, and again, this is me thanking you all for being on this call. Like I'm better at doing my job at creating events because you're all in my world. Like, you all have little pieces. You're all like a great Voltron of awesome, and you've all shown me and helped me be better at taking care of myself. And I think something that we don't talk about enough, and not every educator or event producer has other event producers and educators to hang out with, but like normalizing the conversations that we have struggles, rather than, you know, doing the whole fucking Instagram influencer my life is perfect bullshit. Like, having these conversations and sharing like how we have our struggles and what we're worried about, I think is more important now than ever amongst those of us who do education and event creation. And how do we copy and paste, you know, best practices and normalize the things that we don't talk about as event producers, because we're too busy taking care of our attendees. And that's important too. So Marla, that's my long-winded way of saying you did great. Thanks. Does anybody else want to add anything to that around concerns or considerations for yourself and what you're doing, weaving into your events?
Can I veer back to the first part of your question?
Please.
As to what we're doing for the event in our community, to sort of lay some of, well, re-entry, people having gone feral, however you want to put it. And part of that being like those conversations that are inevitable, that, well, people are generally less liable to pop off in person the way they are online. Thank goodness for that. I feel like a lot of people's filters got real fucked up this year. So I want to be aware that people might be feeling extra raw. So we're making one big change and one big partnership. The big changes is that this is our 38th Folsom Street Fair, which is not Folsom Street Fair this year, but Megahood 2021. I'll remember that eventually. And we're not selling alcohol. That's a 40% revenue reduction for us. But after the considerations of safety, trying to manage it up against COVID requirements, trying to manage it up against people's ragged emotions, and just also recognizing that it's a big labor lift for us, it was a unanimous vote for us to not sell alcohol this year. So that's a big shift. And I hope that that's also going to help with just like people's general interactions with one another. And secondly, we're partnering with an app that Misha and William are familiar with / responsible for us partnering with, which is called Bloom. And the way that it functions is it allows people to click that they're going to the same event, and that then they can chat with each other. So people can maybe get some of their conversations and some of their nerves out beforehand, which I think is super great. It's a nice concept to be able to like, some events that I've gone to, some like of the larger leather events will do like a forum where you can go on and you can be like, here's where you find a car share, and here's where you like chat up people, here's the cruising space. And so it's a way for people to sort of like pre-connect and then make a plan to meet up at the fair. So that that I am hoping is also going to provide a little more support for the folks who are attending. Yes, Kate, I'll find a link, or Misha will. Thank you for asking.
Well, the piece about like if people are coming to certain live events for the community aspect, and as you said, Angel, like they're a little feral, and so they might. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but like when I go for a walk in my neighborhood and I end up running into a neighbor, like we're both really chatty because I haven't talked to people in a long time, and I was noticing that, and I'm imagining for folks going to events for the first time, not knowing anyone, you know, and if you as an attendee you have struggles with anxiety, social anxiety, and meeting people and all these things, the preemptive thing that might be really helpful and help us all ease into going to an event is how do you start to make friends in that community and start to know people before you get to the live event. And that's something that we might be able to do. All of us is like encourage people like, listen, you might be coming and you might be a little bit more feral and anxious than usual. So here's the virtual, meet and greet that we're doing. I mean, William and Misha, like, do you want to give a couple of like, what are some of the things that you've been doing to get people to know each other? I mean, you were doing this during the pandemic anyway, but It was weaving community and connection really well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think those of us who create events are inherently community builders of a sort, even if our events are one-offs, even if our events, happen, just once a year or whatever frequency or interval. Bonobo has long considered itself a community and not simply a series of events. And so we've always done a lot of work to make sure that folks feel connected even outside of the containers that we are creating, like the sort of party containers that we're creating. So we basically just started virtualizing once the pandemic hit a lot of the things that we were already doing in person, so we, for the pandemic, had a happy hour that would happen the week before any party we threw. And so, we started doing a virtual happy hour. We learned about an app called called Icebreaker, but now it's called Gather Round. And it basically allows people to have like sort of round robin, like randomly matched one-on-one connection or conversation with other attendees. And so we started using that, and we started doing Angel Room, the daily Angel Room that Misha talked about, the peer-to-peer support thing. We just decided when the pandemic hit, and Misha just led so much of this work. we need to make sure that this community still feels like a community, even though we're not gathering for the purposes that, or in the ways that we are used to gathering. And so we started, just like working so much to just like create an atmosphere that was thick with connection during this time of profound disconnection. That was the sort of North Star for us. When things started coming back, we followed the same principle, So after our last interview with the public health physician that I mentioned earlier, we announced very shortly thereafter our first in-person gathering in more than a year. It was a picnic at a park in Oakland, and about 250 people came out that day. It was beautiful, and it was amazing, and it was overwhelming, and it was just essential. And we did it again the following month, and we're doing it again this month, and we're gonna keep doing these events, because even as we come back together, these like really intense and somewhat high stakes containers environments, we want people to know that like they're still connecting with human beings, with people, with stories, and we're invested in our community knowing these stories. So the one thing that I forgot to mention about like the kinds of connection that we were doing during the pandemic was we also started doing virtual play parties, and doing those like as with most things, we were doing most of these events weekly and some daily. And then about a quarter of the way through the pandemic, I think by the beginning of the summer, some of them had reduced to like twice a month. And then in the winter, a lot of them reduced to like once a month. And so that's basically how those things are going now. And we're intending, even though the pandemic is, even though vaccines are becoming more widely available in the US, are exceptionally widely available in the US, we're still going to be using a lot of these virtual technologies to keep people connected alongside the in-person containers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I want to swing back around to Bonobo Network because I think the ways that you all do wristbands at your in-person events might be applicable or useful for some other event organizers. But is anybody else want to add from what William was talking about for what you've been doing around any virtual kind of preemptive getting community woven together before you release them into the same room in person?
I mean, can I just add very quickly that
Yeah.
So we have like we're bringing events back at a particular inflection point in Bonobo, where we'd previously been a very high context in-person community where admission only happened via referral, and then over the course of the pandemic we switched to this application based approach, and we're leaning hard on the application and also on accountability on the other hand to like help keep the community safe and make sure that folks are able to sort of execute on our values and principles well. So we basically I lost my train of thought. Dang. Oh yeah. So basically, we one of the things that we're like really doing is making sure that everyone who joins like really understands like what Bonobo is about. So we're trying to make sure that we're doing extra work to integrate the new folks who are joining the community, who may not have quite as much familiarity, may not have like the sort of depth of connection that previous members had. And so, we, got our orientation up online, and, in order to attend our parties, everyone has to view our 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever it is of like orientation videos, and they get an email welcome series that carries some of the same information just about like consent and about like the high possibility low expectation attitude that we're trying to create in our community. And like the sort of finer points of like etiquette and how we sort of think about those, and about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how we're all responsible for, creating an environment where people feel like bought in to the community, regardless of how they identify in the world. So, that is the one thing I wanted to add. We've been doing a lot of extra work on enculturation.
It's like an ounce of community beats a pound of cleanup.
Boy, yeah.
I just said that for the first time. Who knows if it's any good? I'm workshopping here. Off of that, William and Misha, can you guys, you two, describe the bracelets that you use at the events? Because this might be really useful for other people's live events, or variations of it.
Sure. My Misha's holding them now. You want to talk about it, Mish?
Sure. So we have been implementing the bracelet system for quite a while now, and they are red, yellow, green, and they are indicators for desires around non-sexual touch. And so what we offer is, if you're wearing a green wristband, it means that you are open to being touched non-sexually without being asked. And then yellow is open to being touched non-sexually, but they want to be asked. And then red is they don't want to be asked, they would do the asking. And so it doesn't mean that they don't want to be talked to. It doesn't mean that they don't want to interact. It just means they don't want to be approached for touch. With green, like people who are wearing green, that holds some responsibility around being really good about your nose, and like being really willing to, like, if someone goes in for a touch, you just have to be very willing to and able to communicate your no easily and effectively. And then yellows, they just want to be asked every time, and that can just it helps with so the key here is that it's non-sexual touch. So of course, with any kind of sexual touch, you always want to be get consent prior to engaging.
Marla, didn't you all have a version of that for Sex Down South as well? Did we have bracelets that year?
No. We for Sex Down South, we only had a photo policy. So if you didn't want to be photographed, we made you wear purple Mardi Gras beads. But the thing that Angel just posted, that is what I saw too, that I was like, oh my gosh, that bracelet thing would be wonderful, especially because we'll be having our dungeon. Our dungeon's going to be twice as big. And we really want to ensure that, we conduct it as safe as possible. So, yes, that is what will also be a version of that. Our colors are neon this year, so the bracelets will vary, but
it's the 90s concept all over again. This is wonderful news.
Exactly. I'm not in charge of those design things, and I just say, oh, looks good, but
it is a fun way to put branding on too. You can for the event organizers.
Oh, we love our branding. Yes, Angel.
And to be clear, this is not meant to replace conversation or someone asked, what about folks who are colorblind? I'm afraid some of us have to just use our words. Also, we should be using our words anyway. The bracelets are a nice way to sort of like give people a little more ease. In the same way that the photo policy, it's a good way to go back through and pick out who has got a thing on. And it's really for the no photo bracelets and necklaces and stuff like that. That's for post. Like, it's not so the photographer will notice them and not take a picture. It's so that later you can pull them out. And so the thing that this does is it doesn't replace conversations about what you want to have happen. It's a good conversation starter. It's a good way to also not have to ask over and over, because I've noticed that right now going into spaces, the first thing people say is, do you have the shot? Like, are you vaccinated? Can I hug you? And I think that over and over and over all day might be a little exhausting for folks. So it's sort of a way to sort of get closer to having an experience that is filled with the kind of ease that we may not have again since this pandemic changed our lives. And I think that in some ways, the ease that we have lost, we have gained a fine point understanding of consent that was just difficult to teach on this level. And I think that we all got it at once, which is very interesting and not usually the case with large cultural understandings. Like, everybody has had conversations about consent in the last year. Every single human. And that's bananas to me. Like, we were not doing this before. So there's this real big spot where we can like add social lubricant, help people get into the easy zone, but recognize that we're bringing with us the immense learning in our bodies of this year and consent and what it means to really be in risk with each other in a way that is exciting and good, and while minimizing harm.
For sure. There are also great ways to have people check in with themselves as well. So like if you're giving out bracelets at registration, they actually have to think about it for a second. Where do I feel like I'm at right now? Oh, okay, today I'm a green. Yesterday I'm a yellow, things like that. So it's a great way for just a personal check-in as well, and have people really being more aware of where they're at in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, sorry, go on.
Oh no, I was going to ask Romi, because maybe I was at SoulPlay. Were you using bracelets too? And I'm not being like pro bracelets for everything, but it's an interesting thing that helps people. It's a simple tool, like Misha's saying, that gets people to consider where they're at. They can go change a different bracelet for later if they change their minds. And it helps people. The thing that I've noticed is for people who don't want to be approached at certain kinds of events, then it helps, the extroverted people who are super friendly, who want to go meet everybody, to like not go charging at the person who would like some space. So it works on so many different levels. What about SoulPlay, Romi?
We never implemented a bracelet system, though I'm not necessarily opposed to it. We did actually implement a bracelet system similar to the Bonobo one at our last event right before the pandemic took over, which was on February 29th, which was an event that we co-produced with Bonobo. And we did implement kind of the red, green, yellow system, similar to the Bonobo system. We've never done it at our bigger events. I think it's something that we might consider doing. I do recognize I do love the part of, I find it most powerful, the part about checking in about yourself. I think, like, as you said, Angel, I don't think that it replaces, like just seeing someone with a color. I still wouldn't assume that they forgot that they had put the green on 2 hours ago, and now that you can just like pounce on them. I think you still need to approach people with a level of attunement, and using your words and moving slow and kind of getting a sense of what's really going on for them. But I do love the act of self-reflection that it takes when you kind of think about like, what am I wearing? And so some version of that, I think would be great to adopt.
Mm-hmm. And also just to let people know, like with SoulPlay, like you weren't using bracelets and everything was going really great. Like
Yeah,
it's
I
not
mean,
like every
yeah.
this isn't like oh shit, I'm a shitty event producer because I'm not using bracelets. This is more like I just want to take that away from the conversation too. Like obviously we're not here to bracelet shame you folks. Like that's not how this is. But it is like what are the tools that end up being congruent for the kind of event that you're using, or can you use this as a creative jumping off point to figure out the next piece? Because like Angel said, like people are freshly aware in a new way right now about something, and if we can anchor that awareness and really embody it and weave it into our communities, it won't just be like at the end of summer everybody's back to how it was and they're just as sloppy as ever. Like what are those things that we could really anchor and make things more powerful, because it helps us as community organizers and event producers too.
So I will say that I think what we do, and this was built together with Misha, who we've been building this for the past few years together without the bracelets. But I think what SoulPlay does is we overinvest. We really invest heavily in education. We spend a lot of time and resources, like both like when people show up, kind of the way that we welcome people into the event through the registration sequence, and then programming throughout the whole first day, including pamphlets that people get, and kind of there's a lot of educational resources. It kind of people go through an orientation basically as they walk in the door, and that's including kind of like a mock demo. And I know there's a lot of other events that do this as well, but it's kind of like we really invest in that education piece. And then on top of that, we have a very strong, like during the event, support team that continuously provides support, which is emotional support, but then also any kind of, if any misunderstandings are happening, or if people are not sure if they did the right thing or not, there's a place for them to get support on that and to continuously be educated throughout the event. And so I think we've done a pretty good job, I think, at creating, ending up like being a good job at educating people so that most people in the event do a lot, like act in accordance with our values and do slow down and make sure that they're approaching people with the correct kind of speed and attunement.
Thank you.
Even if they don't have a bracelet.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Every educator also has a spiel before their workshop that reiterates consent to each person. So they're getting it, everyone is getting it multiple times a day, depending on how many times they go to a workshop. So that's another way that we instilled that consent culture or care culture into SoulPlay.
Mm-hmm.
Could this also weaves into I know that with Bonobo you have a public accountability process and reporting process and way that you encourage the community to feel safe to come to you, and also how you as the leaders of your community, for people to be able to hold you accountable. And so like to the extent that you all have things in place or are weaving things in place for your events, like what are you doing, what do you have or are putting in place for those situations when there is a consent violation or just an accident, or encouraging people to come to you when they're like, I think I fucked up, like, because I think for live events like there were a lot of events that didn't have those pieces in place, and you all are, in my opinion, cutting edge on a lot of those ideas. So this is a great time to share, and that might help people with their events as well.
Yeah, I just want to say that I would also love to hear what Angel has to say, because they're working with another virtual play party community that's doing some interesting accountability work with their leadership team for love. But very, very quickly on the Bonobo front. Oh, sorry, Misha, do you want to jump in here?
Go for it. I mean, I can add things. But.
Okay, great. On the Bonobo front, we just did a big post in our Mighty Networks instance. It's our new community platform home. About how in Bonobo, we're really trying to create a culture of feedback. Like we really want people, and not in like the douchey HR way. Angel laughing there, but we think that like people are coming to this community because they want connection, and for a lot of these people, they're coming with like 30 or 40 or 50 years of strategies for getting connection that don't work in communities like Bonobo, that run counter to the values. And so, we really think that like if folks, we say like, hey, there's a really low bar for submitting reports using our incident reporting form. It doesn't have to be like a consent violation. It could just be like, wow, this person like really creeped me out, or this person like stared at me the entire party, or something like that. And we want to hear about it so that we can then like reach out to people and be like, hey, like this thing, like we don't know if you know you're doing this, but like something different needs to happen. And we think that like that is just kind, like I think that it promotes good community building. And it also just like helps people to acclimate better. It also helps the community feel more comfortable. So we take on a lot of responsibility like for providing that feedback, more than some other communities and spaces, possibly lots of other communities and spaces. But it's just so important. It's true that we also have a sort of formalized rubric for like thinking through different like boundary crossings and situations that might happen, and how they might like lead to different outcomes. Some of those outcomes could include accountability processes, like transformative justice informed accountability processes. And we also make it really clear that at the end of the day, discretion is in our hands. And I think that like one of the things that we're sort of facing as we grow is just that like these accountability processes are like incredibly resource intensive, and I think that like we're like right now as we like rewrite our consent and accountability policy, we're trying to think like what are the bars, where that someone has to like actually reach. Like when is someone vested enough in the community for us to like invest that level of resource in their transformation versus asking them to like go and do that transformative work on their own outside, and then potentially coming back to us when they have something to show, when they can show their work. And so that's one of the really rubber meets the road type things that we're thinking about. But we have we have an incident reporting form that we've been using since 2016, and SoulPlay has modeled it. A number of other communities in the Bay Area have modeled the form, and we just really try to make clear as frequently as we can, because as I said in the chat, repetition is the mother of learning. We really want people to understand deeply that like we want to hear your reports.
Yeah, I think, and for me, one of the biggest things that we've done is really be clear about our standards of behavior, and then our members are actually holding themselves and each other accountable. And so then that actually just up levels the entire community. And so when somebody is doing something that is out of alignment with our standards, they hear about it, because there is no question because in real life or in like outside of our world, there are lots of gray areas for people, and it's really hard to know, like, what is a consent violation, what is not, and blah, blah, blah. And then the other thing we do is teach people how to have the hard conversation. A lot of times when someone says you just overstepped a boundary, the thing that happens is the response is from defense, is not a listening response. And that is the place often where things just downward spiral and trust gets broken to a degree that it cannot be repaired. And so really being able to take the feedback, because in our community, mostly we're dealing with people who want to stay connected to each other. And so when something happens where a person has a bad interaction, that is like, if they are not just saying, I hear you, I want to know what happened, let me fix it, any other reaction than that, like, is often a huge break in trust. And so, I know in other communities where you're having to deal with a lot more serious violations, or people that aren't willing to take responsibility for their actions, or are so, are acting so out of integrity that you're having to deal with bigger violations. So we are privileged in that area where we have a very strong container of membership.
Can I wrap this back to COVID?
Please.
One of the gifts of the pandemic, this is the thing, any horrible situation is going to have some little nuggets, diamonds hidden in the piles of shit, right? And one of the things that we really got as an organization was time to really look at our processes in a low stakes environment where people weren't actually in person. We did have some virtual events last year. We did some different partnering with folks, but the lifting of responsibility for keeping people unharmed isn't right, for giving the safest container we can for people to play in, it gave us a lot of time to like look at the either cracks or gaping chasms in our plans, our values, or whatever it is that we needed to get right with. And we really did use that time to do that. So one of the things that came out of that is we're trying to figure out a contract with an external accountability partner for Folsom partly, but also we want to make it a group or a community-wide access point, so that community folks who are, I feel like a lot of times what William really spoke well to this, resource is a problem, right? Like, it is really hard for us as a usually 3 staff nonprofit. Right now we're operating at 2 and barely that. We're going to have an HR department? How? Right? Like, we're going to have another person you could talk to? How? So one of the things we took up was a way to figure out how to have that. And the way that we figured it out was to partner up with other small orgs and pay into like a little pool where we can hire this consultancy, and then they can be the external accountability partner for a bunch of us. And they can be the person who we know everything is anonymous because we'll never see it, which is one of the great ways to really encourage. And William, I wasn't laughing about the culture of feedback because it is, now that I think about it, I guess it is a little HR, but it's got this like, people often do that for pretend. I want to do that for real. Like, I really, really want to have a culture both at our office, at our center, in our community, where people aren't afraid to speak out about something not sitting right, not, from discomfort to harm, that whole spectrum. I want people to be able to feel like they can say like, hey, that sucked for me, and here's why, without feeling like they're going to get shut down, shut out, or otherwise punished. Like, that culture of feedback where people are just allowed to say like, hey, that sucked, often, as Misha was saying, leads to you've got that quicker repair circle, quicker and quicker, where it's not something spins out of control into something a lot worse. Instead, you have it where we are working that muscle of getting to be accountable to each other, knowing that that is part of the gift of being in relationship to one another, is that we get to be accountable to each other. And so I think like COVID has allowed us to slow down and really take a peek at the mechanism in a way that I think that a lot of times is difficult when you're just trying to produce, you know? So I think that's one of the biggest things I'm taking away from the crisis point pandemic year, which I know we're still in a pandemic, but I feel like we're down from a full boil to, I don't know, hard simmer, at least here in California. So we're definitely like, I cringe every time someone's like, well, now that we're post-COVID, and I'm like, oh, Jesus, please don't say that. Spit when you say that, as my grandmother would tell. Don't put us in this position. But since we are certainly post-COVID in the sense of a year and 8 months ago, we didn't know what it was. Now we all have been through this thing together, and we're all adjusting to what is new and what will be our next version of normal, which I'd like to just toss that concept out, but you know, I can dream.
I want to riff off something Angel just said, which is encouraging people to report even the small stuff helps you know when something is actually a pattern in somebody, because when you just get one report about someone, it can be very hard to actually say like it's just becomes their word against another person's. Whereas if you have lots of reports over time, you can actually know, oh, this is actually, you know, if these are small things, these are small, this becomes a pattern, and we can actually have something to say like, hey, this is something people have reported over time. We can we have something firm to be able to like offer a person regarding their behavior and what's not okay.
And you're also encouraging your communities to practice speaking up so that they're exercising the muscles. Like so many people can't even tell their close friends stuff. How do you expect them to come to you as the event organizer, or, you know, you who run the monthly, you know, kink event, and you hold the keys to the social kingdom? Like it's absurd to think everyone's going to be telling you everything. Marla, Romi, anyone else want to share about this topic? No, I'll take that as a no.
I'm good on this topic.
Okay. I didn't mean to shut it down. I wanted to invite, you know, more people to share. We do have there's a little conversation in the chat going on about bracelets for vaccinated and not vaccinated. Hot takes, go!
No.
We don't want to confuse people between our wristbands, our consent wristbands, and our vaccination wristbands.
What do you mean?
Well, people are using red, yellow, green for vaccination, for like approaching for vaccination, or like approaching around COVID, and that makes it confusing because our wristbands have always been used around touch. And so,
well, I guess the question is like, if even to like think about having like just any kind of signaling for vax, non-vax, let it be wristband, let it be pins, you know, some kind of hair tie. And
what about a big scarlet V?
Yeah,
like a Letterman sort of, no?
that you have to sew onto yourself. I'm a big no to this. I personally do not like the idea of having kind of a visible marking that separate between vax and non-vax populations. I think so far, all the people that I know that think that that's a good idea are all of the vax population. which makes me suspicious of when like any dominant group wants to mark the non-dominant group in some way. My personal opinion, and this is my personal non-medical opinion, but I would like to see a world in which we evolve from this, where some people are allowed to remain unvaxxed and not socially outcast.
Well, we also have somebody had mentioned, and Misha, you were talking to somebody in the chat about for folks who are immunocompromised and can't get vaccinated, like how are you not just throwing them under the bus? And for me and the conversations I've been having, if you're running an event where the majority of the people are vaccinated, then it becomes a much safer event. It's safer, not safe, for immunocompromised folks. I mean, I'm not having a conversation about anti-vaxxers and that situation. I'm kind of coming from a place of, I'm dealing with folks who can get vaccinated and folks who can't get vaccinated, and how am I doing a harm reduction and weaving that into my event. And so from a safety air quotes perspective, it seems to be, I'm like, okay, we're doing the best we can to reduce harm. And how do I do my due diligence to help people have not just consent because they're starving for social contact, so they will say yes to anything, but informed consent and embodied choice making, where they're, to the best of any of our abilities, able to show up for a situation where they make a good choice, but it doesn't turn out the way they wanted. Similar to like, I disclose to everybody I sleep with and play with, like, I have herpes 1. Never had an outbreak. Don't know where it presents itself. You might get herpes from me. And, for the most part, that's worked out okay. And I have one person in my life who's really pissed at me because they got herpes. And I'm like, I've been telling you that you could get herpes from me for years. And I understand that that's rough and that you're pissed at me, but, it's like everyone's fine with it until it doesn't go their way. And like, how do we help? And also, how do we show up for people when that disappointment and upset is there too? Other thoughts?
Yeah. I feel like I am trying to balance between this sort of more like almost like moralistic way of thinking about COVID risk management from my perspective as a community organizer, and like just being just like really, really practical. And I think that like at the end of the day, at some point in the far-flung future, hopefully like enough people will be vaccinated against COVID that we can like once again start treating COVID as in the same way that we think about the flu. It's not currently the flu, but like at some point you'll be able to think of it in that way. Right now, even in California, where about 70% of people have been fully vaccinated, or we're getting like really close to that number. I think that like the reality is that mutations are happening all over the world. Breakthrough infections are happening, and we just like don't yet know. Young children are still unvaccinated, and it just doesn't feel responsible to me as like an organizer to say, okay, now we can start thinking about this from a purely like individual risk standpoint, in the same way that we think about STIs, generally speaking, from an individual risk management standpoint. At the same time, I do have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder because, I think that like, and this isn't like I'm not speaking to you, Marla, at all. I just want to be like super clear about that. You know, like I have like there are people who are like perfectly healthy who don't want to take the, like, as far as we know, exceptionally small risk associated with getting vaccinated, and, you know, perpetuating the sort of like society-wide risk, you know, that like, you know, suddenly that like we're operating under, you know, like we can't start thinking about this as the flu until many more people in many other states, not just California, in this like interconnected country, this interconnected world, get vaccinated, you know, and even, and to like sort of take that like sort of privilege to the next level, you know, it'll be even hard for us to think about this, for us to think about it in that way, until, you know, the developing world can have access to the vaccines that they so desperately need, you know. And so, and that we're hoarding as a country. I mean, we're hoarding so much that even Canada and Australia are having a hard time getting all their folks vaccinated. And so, you know, I mean, I just think that like, so you know, when I hear people who like get angry because they want to come to the party, but they don't want to have to get vaccinated to do so, like, it kind of pisses me off, because I'm like, well, like, what skin do you have in the game? Like, how are you contributing to this, the like social environment and the medical reality that like, or the epidemiological reality that like even allows us to be at the point where we can consider having vaccinated only parties, you know? So, but I think I won't have that chip on my shoulder forever.
I think there's something going on in the chat that I think would be helpful for us to voice, which is some logistics around how we're doing some of the verification. So we actually ask people to submit their vaccination verification through a form, and then they don't actually get the event ticket until they've submitted their verification.
Right.
And
So in our community of, oh, sorry, go on.
Go for it.
I was just gonna say, in our community of like about close to 1,000 people, you know, something like what, 600 or 700 folks have actually submitted their vaccine verifications, and that's the pool of people who can actually attend our party events. And no one else gets access to ticketing links unless and until they have submitted that form.
Yeah, I'd add that we don't require vaccination currently, but we do ask whether or not people are vaccinated or will be vaccinated by the event. And currently we have a 95% vaccination rate of registered attendees. So take it how you will.
I love when you're calling a chip on your shoulder, William, but the reality of like this happening in phases is really real. Like, we can't flip a switch. We can't go from lockdowns for a year to everybody just being like, well, we'll figure it out if you're vaxxed, if you're not. Like, we have to do this in phases. And so I do understand being frustrated folks who either can't or aren't ready to, or maybe never will get vaccinated, being frustrated that, for instance, they can't go to the sex clubs in San Francisco because they have recently reopened under a vaccinated only policy. I also know that that's not going to hopefully stay the case. And I think like the folks who are running those venues are making a calculated decision the same way the city is making a calculated decision, and the same way that we're all kind of doing on these macro and micro levels. And the calculated decision for me as a human is I'm not going to a sex party if everybody's not vaxxed, because I won't go and play. And I don't know about y'all, but after 18 months, I'm not going to a sex party just to like wave at you from across the room. So I need to know that I am not going to be putting the high risk people in my life at further risk than this much smaller risk, which is still a risk. That's the other thing. I also think people are like, oh, it's a magic wand. It's not a magic wand. It is a risk reduction vehicle. And if we can view it in its proper place as risk reduction, harm reduction, it does kind of take it out of that moralistic space. And I think that a lot of times we do get, especially those of us who don't participate or dabble in the larger moralizing scope of religion, we find our moralizing in people's actions, such as their public health actions. And I think I'd like us to all harken back to the days of the AIDS crisis and recognize what actually worked public health wise was not shaming people, was giving people lots of options, was giving people lots of informed consent. And so I think as long as we keep landing back on that, that we can bridge those gaps that are happening for all kinds of reasons, for access reasons, for health reasons, and for just not knowing reasons. This is the thing, like you are taking a risk when you take a vaccine, the same way you're taking a risk when you do anything, right? When you take a new medication, if you really want the outcome, you'll take the risk. So in this case, if you want the outcome of going to a sex club in San Francisco, you will take that risk. If you are like, I'll shelve that, I'll come back to that in 6 months after I keep saying I'm not an early adopter about anything COVID related. I'm a medium adopter. People are like, I'm going to go to the restaurants the first day they're open. I'm like, go ahead, I'll watch. See how that goes for you. I'll check back in a few months, see how that went for you. I'm one of those wait and see kind of humans. With the vaccine, I got it right away because I have a loved one in cancer treatment. And I was like, I am ready to not stress about this. And I also, if I were to be reproducing, I would start a religion because that would be a miracle. So we all have our risk factors that we're trying to balance against each other. But I think the main key thing is we're trying to reduce risk for the group. And really the way we get that is high enough rates of any good behavior, high enough rates of masks, high enough rates of distancing, high enough rates of vaccines, and we will all benefit, even those of us who are unable, unwilling, or intentionally not participating. They benefit too. And I want them to benefit too, even if I'm a little cross with them.
Well, and this is the thing, like, if you're sitting there listening to the call and being like, goodness, this is a lot. Well, you produce events and you midwife people through experiences. Like, it's always been this way. It's just that a lot of us, not a lot of us, maybe not you all because you're on the call, but like people just cross their fingers and hope for the best. And then you get lucky until you get unlucky. And then nobody has anything in place to actually support their communities. And then, as Misha mentioned, like that's when the trust really gets, mangled and broken. And then it just doesn't help. So I just want to say thank you again for everybody with their contributions, for people showing up, because I think having these conversations and thinking about things and having people to bounce ideas off of, and share best practices, that's how we move. That's how we do better. Angel, you're one of my favorite phrases of yours is "fuck up better." Like if you think that we're not going to make mistakes, that's where did that thought come from? And then if we're always growing and getting better, it meant that what we did 2 years ago wasn't the best that we could do. But this is, I think it's called life, I guess. We're a little over what I scheduled for our time. So I just want to be cognizant of that. Maybe to kind of start bringing this down for a landing. I mean, we can hang out more if we want, but where can people find you or your events if you just want to mention that? And then maybe we'll do like a final sweep for questions or answers. And Marla?
I just have a question actually for any of the event producers around like their maybe COVID statements or anything like that. Do y'all have anything like that? Like, I mean, I know we all have kind of like our guiding principles of what we, what when you go into a space, but like any words on that?
So far we've only released COVID statements to our vendors, staff, and volunteers, because most of the people who attend our events, well, maybe this will be different with the app. We'll probably put it on the app as well. Most of the people who attend our events just walk up. They just turn up and we don't know who they're going to be. So we'll definitely have signage posted, and we are kind of we're playing with that a lot right now so that we can get real concise, because our thing that we sent out to our vendors and stuff, it's a little more comprehensive, let's say. So there's a lot more words than I would like to put on a sign at the entrance to a festival. So we're working on making it concise. We're working on making it really clear for folks. I think the best so far that we've gotten in one phrase is mask mandatory, pants optional. But we're right. So we're looking for ways to really clearly get the point across. The other thing that we're doing is we're putting our public health partners at the entrances to our events. So like the first thing you see is DPH. Before you see any of the sexy, you see Department of Public Health. You get the choice to get a vaccine. And you know, when you have to sit and wait for 15 minutes, we're going to have like some vintage porn for you to look at. Don't worry, it won't be boring. But, you know, we're trying to make it fun. We're trying to make it engaging, but we're also trying to make it super clear that it's top priority to us. And I feel like most of our statements around that, whether they have been about going digital last year, returning to in-person this year, have been clear around that while we really, really, really love having a good time with our communities, that are that providing a safer space to do that in is the most important goal. So so I think all of our languaging will sort of reflect that out. I'm also happy to send you what we do send to our vendors and stuff if you just want like language to pull from. I imagine it'll hit our website soon.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
And do a little round of where can people find you or find out about your event, so we have that captured for folks. Angel, since you were just sharing, do you want to?
Oh, I saw everybody putting into the chat, which is smart because words are, they just gone right away. Folsomstreet.org, fairly simple. And then you get to choose between events and center. Hunt us down.
Great.
And also come visit us in Soma if you're around.
Or donate.
Oh, please donate.
Marla, I'll just pick people. Marla, where can people find out about Sex Down South?
You can go to our website, sexdownsouth.com, and you can find us on social media. We're mostly very active on Instagram, with our handle being SDSCon, and on Twitter and Facebook, we are Sex Down South ATL. So, but just sexdownsouth.com, you can find your tickets, and you can get your ticket to the online conference or to the in-person conference. If you get your in-person conference, you automatically get a online ticket as well. So there's that.
Misha, William, where do people find out about Bonobo Tribe?
You can
Network?
go to apply.bonobonetwork.com, and we are soon to have a brand new website, which will be bonobonetwork.com, but it's not out yet, but it's coming and it's gonna be cool.
So soon. Oh my God.
Almost ready.
When you're an underground referral only thing, you don't think to have things like public facing website, and then everything changes.
You know, Bonobo Network was better when it was secret. I mean, that's what people are going to say. It's good. That's going to be the
It's like Burning Man better last year. Yeah, exactly.
Romi, what about SoulPlay?
SoulPlay, you can find us at soulplay.co or soulplay.co/festival. You can also find us on Facebook, SoulPlay Festival SoulPlay Community. And that's a group where people kind of share and hang out together. But yeah, and you can come join us in September, or you can join Marla. We're on the same weekend, unfortunately. So you can't join both, but you can join Marla or me.
Romi, you could have a Sex Down South booth at and just broadcast stream the virtual at SoulPlay, or something. Who knows? Why am I even talking? I want to say thank you to everybody again. For folks, Sex Geek Summer Camp won't be in person this year, but virtual camp, we're going to run again, and we'll run another session of virtual camp in July. So if you're interested in just business nerding out with a bunch of awesome sex educators and sex positive entrepreneurial type folk, you can go to sexgeeksummercamp.com, and then hopefully at some point I'll be announcing next summer we'll have an in-person event. And again, Sex Geek Summer Camp is a business retreat for sex educators to nerd out on best practices so that we can get our, reach more people and change more lives and make a little bit more money with a little less stress. Any final words from our panelists? If folks who've been watching, you can email me questions. You can post questions on the Facebook Live, and I'll try to, get people answers to things or point people in directions of things. And we'll just do our best to stay in touch and help empower people. Final words from our panelists.
Thank you. See you at the events.
Yeah, thanks
right.
for being here.
Thank you again, everyone. What we can do now is if people want to turn their cameras on, I'll put it to gallery view and everyone can unmute and just say goodbye. And it'll be like a bunch of shots of people and, just say thanks or whatever. If you want. This is not mandatory.
Oh, look at everybody's
Bye.
face.
Bye, everyone.
So much. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for doing what you do in
Thanks,
the world,
guys.
everyone.
Yeah.
You're
Thank you
important.
all for sharing.
All right.
Bye.
Panelists, mwah. Email me if you need
Thank
aftercare. Bye, everyone.
Sorry it's
So-
late. Thank you.
Marla, you were fine.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to
Accepted.
see you, Marla.
Good to
Congratulations.
see you.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Human.
I know.
Good job.
Oof.
I mean, panelists, we can stay and chat for 2 minutes if you want. Everyone else, go away.
We
Go
saw
home. Get out of here.
It's still recording.
Bye, everyone.
Still says